Hi everyone, this is Andy and Mike from Outside Xbox.
Hello.
And we are talking about Dark Souls 2, which we went to a preview event for last week. We got to play the first hour or so of the game.
Yep.
So we're going to talk about our kind of general impressions of the game, some of the new features that you're going to see, and just generally what we thought of it.
Yeah.
Hello there. Travelling all alone in these treacherous times. Well, I hope you have a very good reason.
So one of the big bits of news was that Peter Serafinowicz, the actor who voiced Darth Maul, and he was in Spaced, and he had his own sketch show on the BBC. He's in it, playing a character called Mild-Mannered Pate.
Right.
I thought that was pretty good, because A, he's like a Dark Souls super fan.
Yes.
He always shows up on Twitter talking about how much he loves Dark Souls. And B, he's got the voice he's doing for Dark Souls sounds like a Dark Souls voice.
Yes, it does, yeah. I kept expecting him to break into impressions of like Paul McCartney and stuff partway through.
Brian Butterfield or something like that. But he's got that sort of weird, affectless delivery that characters in Dark Souls have, which sort of contributes to that weird atmosphere that the game has.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, there is always the worry when you're hiring someone who's a big fan of something that they're going to spoil it by being a massive fan of it. But I think he fits in quite well.
I think, my main problem is that I'm so used to hearing his voice in a kind of comedy context. I find almost everything he says funny. I still think it's a good thing. You know, he's super passionate about the project, and he said about the character that it's quite an ambiguous character. You're never quite sure if he's on your side. He's one of the, at least superficially, one of the more friendly characters you'll meet, but you're never quite sure what his motives are.
Well, he said he didn't want to find out himself if his character turned out to double-cross you or not, so he wouldn't have it spoiled for him in the game.
Maybe he's the final boss.
Maybe, that would be interesting. He said he turned up to the recording session wearing a homemade Dark Souls t-shirt.
Yeah, it
saying
said,
"You died" on it, and no one drew attention to it, which I thought was
he must have
funny.
felt like a bit of a nerd. Yeah.
Oh, I remember you.
Okay, so the big thing about Dark Souls everyone talks about is the difficulty, obviously. So it doesn't look like they're trying to make the game any easier with this, but possibly more approachable.
Yeah, so I think fundamentally it's still going to challenge you, but one of the things that I really picked up on that they talked about was the ability to respec your character. Now, when you're playing Dark Souls, the original, if you choose the wrong kind of character or one that doesn't suit your playing style, you're basically stuck with them. You know, any progress you've made, you will lose if you want to respec your character. In this game, you can use a special item or visit someone who will allow you to...
Soul Vessel.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
Right, so which will allow you to completely rework your character. I think a lot of the diehard fans are going to sort of dislike that.
It's sort of counter to Dark Souls' sort of live with your decisions ethos that it has. That said, I would definitely welcome it because... I definitely chose the wrong character class when I played Dark Souls, and I suffered really badly for it. So it would have come in handy. Again, I don't know if it's against like what Dark Souls stands for. I'll be interested to see how much it gets used. Another thing that I think people were worried was sort of against the principles of Dark Souls was the fact you now can have voice chat in co-op. Right. Now, I don't know how you feel about that, but I think the isolation of it is a big part of the atmosphere. Yeah,
I really think that this might have. I mean, you can. It's optional, and so presumably you can turn it off and say I want no voice chat at all in my game. But obviously there'll be certain advantages conferred by having it on, and I think this game more than any other I've played in a long time is about being lonely and about being alone, and then when someone does arrive, not really knowing if they're hostile or not, and I think obviously it's only available in co-op modes, but I do think having someone jabbering away kind of negates that feeling of isolation that you're talking about.
Yeah, especially if they've got like a Drake album playing in the background or something.
Yeah, I think maybe the hope is that anyone who Dark Souls 2 appeals to is going to be taking it reasonably seriously, or at least statistically is more likely to be taking it seriously, and particularly if they've worked out the mechanics of like invading people's worlds, because that stuff's not immediately obvious. It's not like you go to a server browser and click on a person or you match up with your Xbox Live friends. That stuff's not in there.
The other thing they have now is it's slightly easier matchmaking with your friends. There are 10 different rings that you can get, which you can engrave with the name of a god, and if you and a friend have the same god engraved on your named ring, then you're more likely to be match made together. I don't know how much more likely, but it still sounds like you can't just go, right, me and this guy are going to play some co-op.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think, games like Dark Souls are only going to have, a certain number of people online at any one time. And, normally if you're making a game, you don't want to segregate your online audience because you want as many people to play against each other as possible. In this case, I do think that even though there's still going to be like loads of people devoted to that particular god, ultimately you're dividing your player base by 10, and then if you and a mate go on at the same time, I reckon after a few tries, you'll probably be able to get up in a game together. And actually, at that point, again, with the combination of voice chat and stuff, you could see people really like blitzing some of the game just based on the fact that they've been able to get together and been able to game the system in a way that they just couldn't have done with Dark Souls, the original.
Yeah, which is, again, it's more approachable, but it's not very Dark Souls.
No, exactly. I mean, if you're a hardcore player, I'm sure you can, resist the temptation. If you're patient enough to play through a Dark Souls game and you're that serious about it, I'm sure you can resist the temptation to use these things to your benefit. But it feels like at the point when you're going to allow people to game the system that way, why not make it even easier and allow people to just invite their friends in?
Yeah, I don't know. It's just Dark Souls, for me, a lot of Dark Souls is that atmosphere. It's a really unique atmosphere in a video game, which is just a kind of overwhelming, kind of smothering
sense of despair. That's what
despair.
I get.
And just even like the character animations, everyone's really lumbering and slow and sort of resigned, and it's unique. And I think you would lose a lot of that from kind of cracking wise with a buddy.
Yeah, I think that's another thing, is that actually I find Dark Souls 2 quite colourful and quite a bit more of a fantastical environment than maybe I was used to in. I've played more Demon Souls than I've played Dark Souls, so it may be that later Dark Souls areas are like that. But everything I've seen in Dark Souls is very sort of, all the castles and things are very utilitarian rather than decorative. They look like fortresses designed to be stormed, not sort of glorious golden palaces, which is what we've seen in some of the sort of trailers and CG stuff. So I don't know. What do you think of the atmosphere of the game?
It reminded me of Nightmare, the kids' TV show from the 90s. Like a lot of the background plates used for Nightmare, which I really like, just sort of wandering around this. It's very low fantasy, but I thought it was great. There were like some nice outdoor areas. We went through a kind of a foresty bit, and there was like a brook. There's you come into a kind of a forest clearing, and there's a knight sleeping under a tree. And he won't attack you, but you can go up and just sort of prod him with a sword, and he'll come after you. And he's
pretty hard
for that point in the game. But it's stuff like that. It's great. It's those kind of low fantasy Arthurian legend kind of.
Yeah, I almost want more low fantasy, as in like I want it to be bleak and cold and foggy and like that sense of despair again. Like that bit with the brook and the trees and the forest clearing and stuff is beautiful. It looks really nice. And then a bit later on, there's a really beautiful sunset, and I'm like, all this sort of. This sort of positivity comes from like beauty, and actually I sort of prefer the clumping my way through like stone corridors and down staircases and things.
Well, it's offset by the fact that you're a zombie-faced hollow.
That is true. Yes, I spent a lot of time as a zombie-faced hollow, and I loved how the more times I died and the more my health was chipped away, the more bits of me started to fall off. It was like being some
your
kind
hair
of
falls out,
leper,
and your teeth fall out, and your skin goes green.
It's pretty grim. In normal play, if you're just playing and not going around invading other people's worlds and murdering them, your health can be reduced to a minimum of 50%. If you have a ton of sins, and it tracks this automatically because you've been going around ganking people essentially, then it can drop all the way to 10%.
10% of your health. So basically one hit kills.
Yeah.
Pretty much, I would say. Yeah, most enemies, one hit will kill you.
But there'll be some guys who take pride in that, I think, probably.
Oh, yeah. There'll be people who do that first thing and then try and play through the game like that.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's an achievement in Dark Souls 2 for the first time you die.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be a badge of honour for some players to have every achievement but
apart from that one. Yeah, that's awesome, actually.
So that was some of our first impressions from Dark Souls 2. Thanks for watching Outside Xbox, and stay tuned to the channel for lots more on the game coming soon.
Bye.